If you ever thought to yourself that the 3 seconds it takes to boot up your Xbox Series consoles is too long, Microsoft decided to offer the perfect solution. Booting up your console will become quicker than ever as Xbox is testing a shorter startup animation. It will allow players to save a few important seconds that will no longer cut into your game time. It is not a massive improvement in the overall scheme of things considering that the boot up time is already so quickly, but it does show that Xbox is working on improving the overall quality of life features for gamers. Like with every change, update and improvement that comes out, insiders will get first access to it. If you are not aware, Xbox has an insider program and those who are part of it get to test out features before it gets released to the general public. It is a mutually beneficial partnership. We get to test out awesome features before anyone else, and Xbox gets to use us as testing monkeys while figuring out what works. The changes was first noticed by Xbox insiders, and it was confirmed by the Xbox integrated marketing director Josh Muncy, who said on Twitter that the team worked to create a shorter boot up animation that will cut the startup time in half. The quicker load times are not only being rolled out to the Xbox Series consoles, but it will also be for the Xbox One as well. It is surprising that Microsoft is still supporting previous gen hardware with regular updates, but it can be viewed as an overall good thing for those who cannot upgrade yet. Xbox will most likely still continue to update the Xbox One until such a time that the Series consoles is more widely available. Console shortages has been plaguing gamers for almost 2 years now, and it does not make a lot of sense to cut off support for the Xbox One until everyone who wants one can upgrade to the next gen version. One important thing to note about this new update is the fact that most who own a Series console most likely won't even notice the quicker boot up times, considering that consoles usually put themselves in energy saver mode instead of turning off completely, meaning that when you turn on your console, your dashboard is usually available almost immediately. The new boost will assist in quicker load times for a dead boot up, but other than that, most will not notice anything. Even with all of that said, it is still a great update and it will go a long way in assisting people in getting to their games quicker. In an era where people's attention span is shorter than ever, wanting instant gratification, these type of time savers can go a long way in making people happier with the console that they choose to invest in. Speaking of investments, it is these type of updates that can draw people to a specific console. At least it factors into decision making along with other exclusive game content. With Xbox trying to expand its footprint, it is a great way to go, especially with its Xbox Game Pass servers growing every year.
I'm dying inside, and all I see are demons.
Xbox just released its earnings report and it does paint a very interesting picture in terms of where the brand is headed. Xbox said in their 2022 fiscal year, Xbox game revenue decreased 7% or $259 million year over year, but it was due to a drop in Xbox content and services as well as Xbox hardware. Overall, it is in line with what Xbox expected. Despite the drop in Xbox gaming revenue, this quarter is the second best quarter for Xbox ever. This means that Xbox has been heavily growing over the last 20 years to the point where a drop of 7% still resulted in them having one of the best years ever. Now, there is a couple of reasons why we are seeing this drop in hardware, but we will get to that part later on. As Xbox stated before, Xbox content and service revenue decreased 6% as well. Now, this is due to the lower engagement hours and monetization in third-party and also first-party content. All of this is also partly due to the growth in numbers of Xbox Game Pass. Despite all of this, the Xbox Series X and S is estimated to have sold almost 60 million units, making it the fastest selling Xbox console yet. So they say here that Xbox has dropped in revenue, value, and it is in large part due to hardware. Now this part does paint a clear picture in terms of what direction Xbox is headed in. I spoke about this last week, but it is clear that Xbox is trying to head in a more digital direction, and as such there is no longer a need to own a console in order to play your games. Since you can now get access to your game library on PC and mobile through cloud gaming, many people are just opting for that option instead. Xbox is also expanding this by offering an Xbox app that will now allow you to access your games on your smart TV without a console needed, and this is a trend that Xbox will be continuing with. Now with that in mind, the bigger question here does become, will cloud gaming eventually replace console gaming? Yes, and thank you for watching. But on a serious note, let's just take a little bit of a deeper look here. When Xbox launched in 2001, console gaming was on the rise. The success of Nintendo and PlayStation proved that the market was ripe for the taking, so Microsoft swooped in. Fearing complete dominance from Sony, Microsoft decided to brand themselves as the perfect alternative, and their impact was felt almost immediately. Although falling far short of the success of the PlayStation 1 and 2, Xbox had still managed to brand themselves as a viable competitor to both Sony and Nintendo, selling over 24 million units of the original console. It might not seem like much, but considering that Nintendo by this point was an established market leader with over 30 years of sales behind them, and PlayStation themselves having a 10-year head start, Microsoft and Xbox were entering a very competitive market. The Xbox 360 was where Microsoft really made a name for themselves, and it was also during this time when the quote-unquote console wars really picked up. The Nintendo Wii was dominating the market, but PlayStation and Xbox were right up there, selling almost 100 million consoles in their own respective rights during the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 era. Now during that time, the first iPhone was not even released yet, and the idea of mobile gaming competing with consoles in any serious capacity was a complete joke. Now instead of giving you a further history lesson, I'm just going to fast forward to 2022. Mobile gaming today is the biggest market in the world, with reports estimating that they will soon own 60% of the total global gaming market. The estimates is set to reach $156 billion out of a total $222 billion market dollars. As things currently stand, users all over the world download 45% more mobile games weekly than in the first quarter of 2021. In the first quarter of 2022, players have spent $1.6 billion per week, making them by far the undisputed global leader. Now this should not come as much of a surprise, considering that 375 million smartphones get sold every year. Compare that to consoles and you might understand why so many companies are pushing forward with mobile gaming. Mojang with Minecraft, Epic with Fortnite, Activision with Call of Duty have all heavily reaped the benefits of this market, although not everyone has enjoyed the same success, and that trend is set to continue. Xbox once tweeted a picture that perfectly summed up consoles. It showed a man buying a 360, and then it showed him again years later with his children holding an Xbox Series X. Although it might look like a touching photo, it also showed a much bleaker reality. Console fans age with each generation, meaning that it is not the younger people buying new consoles every generation, but rather the same group of people who brought the previous previous version, now just 7 years older. The younger generation is far more likely to play games on mobile, and as such xCloud was born. Microsoft realized that gaming was reaching a different direction and as such decided to shift focus. Today almost every release can be played through the cloud on mobile as well, and that is a trend that is set to continue. As the market for mobile grows even bigger, we will see more game companies make the shift, not only releasing their games on cloud for mobile, but even making mobile exclusive games like what Blizzard tried to do with Diablo Immortal. As the market for mobile continues to grow bigger, we will see more companies make the shift, not only releasing their games on the cloud for mobile, but making mobile exclusive games like what Blizzard tried to do with Diablo Immortal. Although the gaming world is not fully ready for mobile yet, the shift is already happening. Xbox for their part is playing it slowly, making it clear that everything is player's choice and ensuring that all their games is still accessible on all devices, including PC and console as well. It is no doubt the lesson that they learned in 2013 with the Xbox One always online controversy. Although now looking back we might say that they were ahead of their time, back then the gaming world was just not ready for it. Online gaming is taking over and we do not need to look any further than digital game sales. As we see the age of the digital market grow, cloud gaming is taking over with it. Xbox might say that right now there is no desire for cloud gaming to take over consoles. I have a feeling that 5 years from now we will be playing our games vastly different. PC gaming will go nowhere. It has stood for 50 years and it will probably stand for 100 more. Cloud gaming on mobile though is most likely going to be the #1 way that most choose to play. Then again, it already is. One thing to note though is how much the landscape for Xbox has changed over the years, while things for PlayStation has very much stayed the same. There are some people who are pleased with all of this, and of course some who do not do very well with changes. While Xbox is all in subscription-based services, trying to sell themselves as the Netflix of gaming and fully embracing the digital age, Sony for their part is still very much a traditional console maker and video game publisher. Sony as things stand is the second most successful game publisher out there, only behind Chinese giant Tencent. Although many have been calling on PlayStation to embrace some of the policies that Xbox have implemented on their own platform, like better video game subscription services with day and date releases, there is no good reason why they would decide to do that. Although Xbox gaming is highly successful, there is no denying that during the Xbox One era, they heavily suffered and were set back massively. A drastic overhaul was needed in the company and there were very little investment taking place for the future. Phil Spencer was the perfect person for this change, and since then they have invested almost $100 billion in acquisitions alone. Many might think that the talent should be homegrown, but that is crazy. There is nothing wrong with acquiring talent. With that said though, Sony has always been the gold standard within the gaming community, and as such there is no need for them to make any drastic changes right now, considering the amount of success that they have been experiencing. Sony is the gold standard of AAA first party exclusives, so it just sounds crazy to suggest that they should be following Microsoft and make their games available on a subscription based service for $10 $60 a month when they can just sell 15 million copies of each game for $70 each. Microsoft is making their changes to catch up to Sony, so there really is not any need for PlayStation to make any drastic current changes. I do think what Xbox is doing will be future-proofing them in this ever-changing digital world, but there is no proof as of right now that video game subscription services is the future. Game Pass is a great value to the customers, but no one will know in the long term what the future is going to be for subscription-based services, and that will stay true for a very long time. As of right now, we know that the service is a massive success in terms of numbers, but we do not know how successful it is in terms of profit. At 25 million subscribers, I do not know if they are even breaking even yet. I do believe in the service, and based on what I've seen with Game Pass and how it is trending, they will be extremely profitable as well, but in the end only time will truly tell. Microsoft does not share these type of numbers, so no one will truly know. I've always been an Xbox person and it is my preferred platform of choice, but I also believe that all gamers should choose how they want to play. I never understood people worshipping pieces of plastic underneath their TVs and pushing their own personal choice off on other people. As such, I think there is enough space in the gaming market for both Sony and PlayStation to exist while still following vastly different business strategies. While logic would dictate that an investment into the digital market would be a massive advantage, there is no guarantee that that investment in subscription-based services will be successful, and as such Sony should probably be smart and follow along with what has been working for them for years now. For as long as Xbox and PlayStation have existed, fans have always gone back and forth over which is the best. It is the classic console wars that we have been hearing so much about.
I wake up in the mornings thinking halfway to the bottom there's a loud distorted scream.
Xbox, for their part, after playing it up for many years, have come out and said that they are no longer interested in any of that. They also stated that although they did in fact heavily play into it, especially during the early days of the Xbox 360, they mostly did it to motivate one another, and honestly I do believe it. I also believe that both Sony and Microsoft did motivate one another to do better. Everyone knows that competition breeds better results and ultimately a better product and price for consumer. There were a time during the red ring of death days when it looked like Xbox might not survive, and if that were the case, I think that the console landscape would be vastly different today. There are many features that can be directly contributed to the console wars, like the investment that Microsoft made into studios, Game Pass, as well as backwards compatibility. I do not think that anyone wants a monopoly in video games, and as such, it is very important that both companies continue to do well and also push each other forward. There is obviously some negatives as well for playing into the console wars, and the biggest downside to all of that is obviously the fanboys who treat console gaming like a team sport and a religion. Although there is nothing wrong with having a preference, I definitely do, and it is Xbox. I make no apologies for that, but pushing that choice off on others is disturbing. Xbox and Sony might say that there is no console war, but the truth is that the battle for market dominance will always be there. Microsoft has been buying studios left and right, so it was only a matter of time until Sony struck back.
Those crazy eyes, they go the mile.
Sony made big noise when they announced the purchase of the former Halo developer Bungie for $4 billion. It might not be as big as the Activision Blizzard deal, but it did signal that PlayStation was in the business for studios as well. Acquisitions has become the new normal, and with that, most console gaming fans has been on the edge of their seats waiting to hear who is next. This brings us to Sony and the latest rumors that are suggesting that they might be taking over Square Enix soon. Square Enix has been struggling for a while now, and it is not hard to understand why. After the Avengers joke, the company did fall on hard times. Although it might not be the reason for their fall, they did bank on the game to save them. The hope was that the Avengers will be the next Warzone, bringing in billions of dollars every year, but ultimately that did never happen. The game seemed doomed from the start, riddled with bad business practices. It was clear that they were trying to make money instead of just making a good game. Now, after a long line of bad releases, Square Enix finally decided that it was time to get rid of a few IPs and studios. They sold off studios to the Embracer Group for $300 million, and with it they lost Crystal Dynamics, who is responsible for Tomb Raider, as well as Eidos Montreal and Square Enix Montreal. And with it, they also lost the license to the Guardians of the Galaxy IP as well. Now, although I am sure that the license for that game was probably already revoked by Disney before the deal even went through. Now, with all of this, it does show that the game publisher is open for purchasing, having sold so many studios already, and as such, many expect Sony to swoop in next. PlayStation already had a very strong relationship with Square Enix. In fact, it did surprise me that they did not try to buy Tomb Raider, but with that said, they might have been interested in Square Enix Tokyo instead. The Tokyo studio is arguably the most successful, as they are responsible for Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy. Since the biggest Final Fantasy games are already exclusive to the PlayStation platform, we might see them take full control over it soon. Although no official sources have confirmed anything yet, many are speculating that there is a deal in the works. This will be a big deal for Sony, as both those IPs are iconic fan favorites. To buy more studios, you will need money though, and one thing that is common to note here right now is the fact that gaming revenue across the board is down. Sony is no exception to this.
I think there's something wrong with me, cause all I see is death. Every time I go outside I look like
Sony has cut its annual profit outlook, warning of weaker game sales. The brand new adjustment came after Sony revealed that they shipped just 2.3 million PlayStation 5 consoles in the latest quarter. Although it is a 4% increase for them, they did expect that number to be much higher. PlayStation as it stands has currently shipped 21.7 million units, and that might look like an impressive number, but they did hope that that number would be much bigger by now. There is a number of reasons why consoles has not been sold at the rate that they were hoping for, and the biggest was the pandemic. The demand for PlayStation has always been there, but the shortages of chips worldwide did supply them with a massive problem. That problem still persists even to this day. Now, hardware sales might still be up despite all of this, but software sales did take a massive slump, falling 26%. Sony did give a multitude of reasons for this, the biggest being the lack of first-party releases over the last year. Now, although they did have Gran Turismo 7 and Horizon Forbidden West, both these titles failed to meet expectation. Gran Turismo 7 seemed doomed from the start with poor graphics and a bad business model. Horizon though did have all the potential. Horizon Forbidden West is is a great title and in every stretch of the imagination met the expectation of players and what they had for it, but it just released at the wrong time. They had to compete against Elden Ring and that was a battle that they were just never going to win. Now to be clear, bad sales for Sony is still in the tens of millions, and on top of that the first Horizon game did sell 20 million extra units in anticipation for the sequel, but Sony did state that it is the lack of first party sales as a reason for their revenue decline, so who am I to argue with them? Sony is now revising their annual profit outlook down 16% for their gaming side, and they do expect that to fall even further. I mentioned earlier in the video that Microsoft is also down overall, although they did have their second best year ever, and with it does show that this is not just a Sony problem, as Microsoft is making the same prediction. Not all numbers for Sony is bad though, as they have 46.3 million PlayStation Plus subscribers and 105 million PlayStation Network users. They also relaunched their Game Pass alternative subscription services, although we won't know the impact of those for quite some time. One thing to note about Sony though is the fact that when they have no first party game releases, their revenue drops heavily. That might not be the best long-term strategy in a digital age. I did say that Sony had a very successful model and there is no reason to change that, and for the most part that still holds true, but it is also worth pointing out that when you look at Xbox and their first party releases that they had over the last 5 years, I can pretty much count them on my one finger, and with that they still continue to outdo themselves each and every year. Maybe reaching more players through services like cloud gaming and Game Pass is not the worst solution after all. Now it might sound like a contradiction of my previous point and ignoring the success of Sony, but it is just a point worth thinking about when you look at all of the revenue drops. Xbox has been on the rise, and although there might not be too much to worry about for PlayStation as they still continue to set records, Xbox is outselling them at the moment. PlayStation might have the number one overall spot, but Xbox has been the best selling console for the last 3 months. PlayStation is still struggling with shortages that can be directly linked to their revenue fall, but it is a problem that they should also take responsibility of and also sort out. Xbox for their part has mostly figured out the demand problem, but Sony just seems to be struggling. It is a problem that Sony themselves admit and said that they need to fix. The demand for PlayStation consoles is always going to be there, but if you cannot meet that demand, it doesn't mean too much for your bottom line. Sony though is set for a strong first and second quarter, as one of their most anticipated games of all time is on the way. God of War will be a summer blockbuster or winter depending on where you live, and it could even be a Game of the Year contender. It will most likely go to Elden Ring, but you do never know. They are also working on The Last of Us remake, which is set to release soon. Now there is one thing to note here, and that is the shift from PlayStation and their long-term stance on console first. Over the last few years we have seen Xbox embrace PC gaming completely, and Sony by this point is not far behind them. They have already released some of their biggest titles on PC, and that trend is set to continue. The Last of Us remake will be a day and date PC release, and I think that is great to see. I've probably said this 4 times by now throughout the video, but Sony is the gold standard of AAA games, and seeing those big titles making its way to PC is awesome for those of us who do not own a PlayStation 5. I'm sure that PlayStation players feel the same way about Xbox games on PC. Now Xbox right now does not have anything going on, and I do not say that lightly. They have no big first party titles for the rest of the year. Next year is going to be different though, with Bethesda releasing their first 2 games under the Xbox banner since the acquisition. Starfield will be the main event and all eyes will be on the game. Now, I'm always nervous when it comes to Bethesda, as they seem to have this policy of releasing things broken and then fixing it later. The game was delayed though by a year, and that does signal that they want to release a complete product, a decision that most likely came from Xbox. Now, Xbox might have some big games in the pipeline, but it is these acquisitions to look out for. Not only is Bethesda releasing some big games for Xbox, but it is also very likely that Activision Blizzard will soon be responsible for boosting the Xbox library even more. Right now, all of the hype is focused on Diablo 4, and logic dictates that it will be a release under the Xbox banner. It won't be exclusive to Xbox, but it will most likely be a day-and-date Game Pass release. Lots of things are happening in the gaming world right now for both Sony and Microsoft, as they are both doing great things while also following very different business models. It proves that there are more than one way of doing things, and more importantly, the current gaming landscape is big enough for both of these companies to exist.